Welcome back. You're watching Power Lunch. Let's talk about the food security ordinance, which actually went through from the cabinet last week. But this morning, there's been some conflicting reports in the morning which suggested that the president approved the food security ordinance. Later on, the Congress, rather the UPA, at a press conference, I think, which ended just a few minutes back, said that the president has still not passed the food security ordinance. So there's one sort of confusion going on there. But what are the fiscal implications as far as food security ordinance? A couple of them include the fact that it could actually raise the government's food subsidy burden quite significantly to as much as 1.5% versus about 0.7, 0.8% as of now. So let's understand the macro implications and the fiscal implications in particular from Dr. D.K. Joshi, Chief Economist at CRISIL, joining us right now. Dr. Joshi, thank you so much, sir, for joining us. You know, aside from the welfare impact of the food security ordinance, let's talk about the fiscal impact. What's your take here?
Well, I think clearly it has fiscal implications because you have to provide subsidies and you have to budget for it. It has to come from the budget. So clearly, I think if you want to keep your fiscal deficit under check and at the same time provision for higher food subsidies, the only way to do it is to cut other subsidies, which is fuel subsidy, fertilizer subsidy, and I think that's what is the broad objective of the government. I mean, they've already started reducing the fuel subsidy bill, and I think this slowly we'll also have to see them move on the fertilizer side. So I think the space can only be created by cutting other subsidies. If you don't do that, then I think obviously the fiscal deficit will bloat. I mean, it will punch a hole in the deficit, bigger hole.
What are your estimates telling you? What kind of a fiscal gap are you expecting if this actually goes through? Because the sense is that the government, the current ruling government, there are political implications to this as well, that the current ruling government has just passed on the burden to the next government which comes in at the center. What are your calculations suggesting? What will be the additional additional subsidy burden on the economy?
Well, I think immediately, I don't think for this 2013-14 you will see much impact. There's already 10,000 crores which is budgeted. But I think going ahead, I think depending on how much subsidies actually doled out and how much subsidies cut in other segments, I think that will determine the net impact. So I think there are many unknowns right now. But if you don't do other reforms and just push the food subsidy bill, obviously I think fiscal deficit could go up to 0.5% of GDP also. I mean, so it depends. I mean, it's now you cannot answer this question in isolation.
You know, the reason I'm harping on this issue so much is because our research seems to suggest that there could be issues beyond the fiscal side. I'll take you through some of those. For instance, there's a thought that says that in case the government would need to have adequate food stocks every year for this purpose. That's one. Secondly, in case there's a deficit monsoon, the government will need to buy food grains. Now, that would have an additional impact on global food prices, thereby pushing inflation as well. How do you factor in all these variables?
Well, I think those are true, but I think we'll have. I think right now the food stocks are sufficient. I mean, at least for rice and wheat. I think even if you provision for your buffer norms and even if you take into account the food subsidy bill dole out, I think even then you have enough stocks. Yeah, it will be a pressure. So I think that's why I said. I mean, it is. You'll have to make sure that the entire system is synchronized. I think. Till now we have ignored agriculture for the last 20 years, and if this bill is through and the kind of food demand increase that we are likely to see, under that scenario I think there's no other way but to raise agriculture productivity. If you don't do that, yeah, there are inflationary implications, and I think food inflation has anyway been a sticky issue in the last 6 to 7 years. We've seen double-digit food inflation, and that scenario is unlikely to change. I mean, if you don't improve agriculture productivity. So I think I would look at it from the side of what are the imperatives. I mean, if you don't do that, I think clearly you will see more inflation and you will see more costs, because I think if you have food grain storages, you will also have carrying costs. I mean, you have to take care of them. You have to. Food Corporation of India does incur a lot of cost in taking care. So all those things are there. So I think the basic point is that once you have done this, I think you have to start moving on the other segments, which is cutting other subsidies, raising agriculture productivity. I think those are very, very critical at this juncture. If you don't do them, then I think you just have a burden on your shoulder.
Okay, that was the supply side, but how do you cater to the demand side? Because the experts believe that this bill could also push up consumption demand further, because now you would need to spend a very low portion of your total income on the food grain basket. So consumption of other items would increase, thereby giving more push to inflation.
Well, I think it is going to be from the BPL households essentially, and I think we did estimate that, and I think what we found was that the additional spending on the hands of the household will be around 4,400 rupees per year, provided that the bill is fully implemented and all the beneficiaries get it. And I think that's going to create demand for some additional food, which is the nutritious food like your eggs, meat, proteins essentially. And it's also going to spill over to consumer demand for some FMCG and other categories, maybe also for health and education. So I think it will be distributed across these categories. So I think that's why it becomes important to ensure the supply is sufficient.
Dr. Joshi, hi, this is Bianca. I'm just going to shift a little away from this discussion and get your views on the rupee. The ease with which the rupee sliced through 60 and it's headed towards 61. Do you think 65 is perhaps anecdotal?
Well, rupee is very, very hard to predict. What we have seen over the last couple of years is that between 2004 and 2008, when the economy was booming, there was enough global liquidity, rupee was on an appreciating trend. And now I think after the Lehman crisis, the trend has moved, though the variation around the trend is tremendous. The variability of exchange rate has increased manifold. So now what we typically witness is that after every episode of sharp depreciation, the rupee tends to stabilize at somewhat stronger levels. So I think on that basis, we predicted rupee at around 56 by March 2014. Now, in between, I think there are many factors that could come into play.
Sure.
And it could weaken also. Because our vulnerability is pretty well known, and I think we are more dependent on global liquidity, on global risk appetite than ever. So I think it becomes very critical to attract capital inflows, because the pull factor from the growth side is hardly there. The economy is in a very weak wicket. So it has to start reforming, it has to start opening up to get more capital. So I think at this juncture, how the Fed will react, I think all those things become very important. More than I think what high current account deficit is is a given. You cannot do much about it in the short run. But I think so you basically are at the mercy of foreign investors.
Right. Of course, there are many moving elements in this equation, Dr. Joshi. But we've been hearing about how the RBI is, cracking down on forex speculative trading, and we've been hearing about how there have been calls that have been made to, trading desks with rather explicit messages about cutting down their positions. Would you think it's rather dramatic, drastic even, and something not per tradition?
Well, I think if there is something, I don't have much information on this, but I think if there is some speculation going on which is triggering sharp movement in currency, then I think the regulator can get in and I think have a look at that. But I think at the fundamental level, I think we are in a vulnerable situation. So rupee is depreciating more because of those reasons, and speculation, etc. They increase the intensity of volatility. They don't typically drive the currency in any given direction.
Okay. What with also the crude back at 105 sort of levels, rupee at 60, in terms of a recovery or an improvement in the macro data, that gets delayed by just as much, and also that 57 by 2014 also gets delayed by just as much then, isn't it?
Well, I think the oil price increasing is really bad news, because I think we are in the Asia Pacific region, we are the most vulnerable economy as far as oil is concerned. It is subsidized. It is a large part of our import basket. It has inflationary implications. So I think if you combine weak rupee and strengthening oil, I think that's a recipe for problems ahead if that continues.
Dr. Joshi, thank you so much, sir, for joining us for that detailed discussion on the food security ordinance as well as on the rupee and the trajectory that the rupee is taking. Let's move on. Let's